project is NOTEARS for estimation of time-varying dynamic Bayesian networks. Structured learning of direct acyclic graphs is challenging in general due to the combinatorial search space. It is an NP-R problem. The complexity scales super exponentially with increase in the number of nodes. NOTEARS is a non-combinatorial optimization algorithm which is efficient in doing score-based learning of tasks. It converts traditional combinatorial optimization problem into a continuous problem that can be solved using traditional solvers. The optimization setup is shown as here. On the left-hand side, we can see that it is a combinatorial search space. On the right-hand side, it has been converted into a smooth scoring function that enforces the acyclicity constraint by setting inequality to 0. Here, H is the proposed smooth function over real matrices, and G is the D-node graph. Next. Time-varying dynamic Bayesian networks are processes that can model stochastic temporal processes, and in time-varying dynamic Bayesian networks, a transition matrix A is associated with each time instant, and it varies with time. Estimating the structure of these networks require us to capture both inter-relationships and interrelationships between nodes of the graph that vary with time.
I will now describe the data sets that we use for our experiments. There are basically two kinds of data sets: static data set and dynamic data set. Static data set is in a nutshell described by the ideal relation x equals xw as shown on this slide. Excuse me. And as shown on the slide, and as we know, these data sets, the data points, the d-dimensional data points, the d is the number of nodes in the graph, is generated by a directed acyclic graph, as we can see in this figure. Now, if we want to simulate synthetic data, then we need to take care of the topology order of W, and for a particular node, we need to generate the data we need to generate its data values based on the values of its parents. For a dynamic data set, the equation is a bit different. In addition to the intra-time term xw, there is an additional inter-time term ya, which basically makes this an autoregressive model up to a certain number of time steps. For example, in the figure shown here, this model, the data point at time t depends on the data points at time t-1 as well as time t-2 for an autoregressive order of 2. And the y matrix consists of the data from time t-1 as well as t-2, and the A matrix consists of the connections that are made from those respective time points to the current time point. So therefore, by default, the A matrix is also a directed acyclic graph in nature. So this is how the dynamic data can be generated. But before this data is generated, W and A themselves need to be generated, and they are generated usually using some rules such as an Erdos-Renai model or Barabashi-Albert model, which is described on this slide. Some of the real data sets that we use are now described here. The SARCS data set of 2005 contains continuous measurements of expression levels of proteins and phospholipids in human immune cells. There's also a consensus network with 11 nodes and 17 edges based on biological experiments and literature. Dream4 is a real dynamic data set that we used, and it is a gene expression data set provided in a network inference challenge. It consists of 5 independent data sets with time series recordings across 21 time steps for 10 genes and 100 genes respectively.
So this is experimental results for linear NOTEARS. On the left is the ground truth, and on the right is the result of predicted graph from linear NOTEARS assumption. As we can see, there are some misses and mispredictions of edges in linear NOTEARS assumption. The next slide shows the results of the general NOTEARS results. General NOTEARS does not assume the graph generation process is linear, and we can see it predicts more edges. And for the next slide, we have results for GGM, which is in which we build Gaussian graphic model for the ground truth SACS dataset. And as we can see, compared with NOTEARS, it predicts less edges and has lower performance scores. And the next slide, we are going to talk about NOTEARS implementations. Basically, we extend NOTEARS by adding previous time point informations, and then we predict PA matrices, and we calculate, we optimize PA matrices, and we then we just generate the underlying adjacency matrix W. And the next slide shows simulation results of NOTEARS. As we can see, we have very precise prediction of W and some interslice matrices. But for interslices matrix A, we are not 100% correct. Next slide.
Here is the performance we got for the Dream4 datasets. We used the 3 time series of the data and compared with the gold standard adjacency matrices with the estimated ones. For each time series, we adjusted the coefficients for the regularization penalty to get the best performance. We can see that in general, NOTEARS is not able to perfectly recover the ground truth. Next slide. The figure here shows the MSE of the experiments conducted on Dream4 datasets as well, using not only the 10 gene network, but also the 100 gene network, which is much bigger. We can see that the NOTEARS with the general model provides little smaller MSEs than the linear NOTEARS, while the NOTEARS with linear SEMs achieves even lower MSEs, which indicates that incorporating time series information into the model does improve the performance of the model. Next slide. Here is a summary of the contribution of our project. We tested the linear and general NOTEARS models on both simulated datasets and real datasets. We successfully implemented the process for dynamic simulated data generation and the NOTEARS model and replicate the good results using simulated data. We also conducted experiments with the different choice of hyperparameters on both simulated data and real data. Next slide. As for the future work, there are 2 main technical directions to go. The first one is to relax the assumption that the dynamic Bayesian network structure is fixed over time. And one reasonable solution is to incorporate the time-varying linear dynamic Bayesian network and assume that the structure changes smoothly over time. The second future direction is to extend the current linear NOTEARS model to a general one, which means it is not restricted to linear SEMs, since the ground truth of the real data is very likely to be nonlinear. And the last one is we can experiment on larger real data sets, such as the single cell gene expression data set, and verifying it with the simulated time series data generated by Monaco. Thanks.